The Cosmic Adventures of Captain Hob by Cameron James Drury. Narrated by Cameron James Drury. Chapter 6. The Duel. The early morning sun rested warmly upon the fair people of Fairview as they cheerfully left their homes for Sunday Mass in what was another picture-perfect blue sky day. The previous night's storm had abated, leaving trees and grass sparkling green and the air fresher than ever. Families packed into their cars, heading first to church and then to parks for a Sunday drive, or home to their prepared dinners and activities of leisure. Doug the mailman looked on in seething jealousy. Although the post office was closed on Sundays, Doug was inevitably out on mail duty. His two colleagues, Evan and Christopher, had been unable to complete Saturday's mailing due to the predictably explosive side effects of the post's office coffee. Now, Doug was stuck covering for their sorry hides.
I keep telling them to stop drinking that horrible off-brand stuff,
Doug grumbled furiously to himself.
Making me pick up the slack. They don't pay me enough for this.
His voice trailed off as he waddled towards the last house on the block, hair instinctively standing on end, expecting rabid toy poodles to bound around the block at any moment. He did not usually take this mailing route since it was Christopher's. Doug hurriedly stuffed the mailbox with its contents, nervously throwing glances toward the house. He didn't know which homes had dogs, and it always seemed that the sneaky little devils plotted the most insidious ways to catch him off guard. As Doug slammed the mailbox lid shut, neck prickling, he spotted it out of the corner of his eye. In the distance, on the other side of the street, a small but well-built wiener dog stood, staring daggers into Doug without an owner in sight. The two faced off in a tense standoff, staring intensely at each other from either side of the road. The chatter of birds above ceased as a lone cloud passed in front of the sun and blocked its radiance. Doug was frozen with indecision, knowing full well that he was utterly exposed with nowhere to run. As the minutes trickled by, curious onlookers began peeking out of their windows and emerging on their porches, drawn by the prospect of some excitement. "Hey, honey," a man called through his open door, lounging on his porch with a newspaper. "Fetch the kids. It's that mailman again." An old lady wheeled onto her front porch in a wheelchair from where she had been watching through her blinds.
Give us a good show, Sonny.
She called merrily, brandishing a cane in Doug's direction. Beads of sweat began to run down Doug's face as the pressure to perform for the neighborhood weighed against his intense distaste for dogs. In a split-second decision, his flight-or-fight instinct kicked in, and concealing his fear, Doug began yelling incoherent nonsense, spreading his arms and legs apart, attempting to intimidate the little hound.
Yee-woo! Whoop! Whoop! Wee-doo!
The wiener dog stood his ground as a tumbleweed blew down the street, silence reigning once again. The miniature dog bared his little snout into a growl, calling the mailman's bluff as the entire block held its breath, seeing who would draw first. The sky above was burning red, the air rendered nearly unbreathable with smoke and embers. Captain Peters painfully rolled out of the debris that was once a C-47, barely conscious and grasping for breath. He staggered upright, and after a few moments of painful gagging, nausea, and confusion, he began running, half-bent. He was off balance and fell often, but he knew that he had to escape capture by the Germans. Somehow, 2 hours had already passed since the crash of his plane, though the rays of the morning sun were obscured by storm clouds, torrents of bitter rain, and plumes of smoke and ash. The goggles on his pilot's helmet fogged as the sheepskin in his bomber jacket became soggy, weighing down his exfiltration of the crash site as constant, deafening thunder rolled overhead. As he staggered along, Captain Peters registered dully that he should be grateful that he even survived the crash, but all that he could think about was how he yelled at his brother and what could have been their last interaction on Earth. The captain could do no more than to pray to God that his brother had made it. He suddenly heard a hellish roar right overhead, causing him to hit the ground, heart pounding. Looking up, he saw what he assumed to be a downed German fighter plane. Blazing with fire, and it was headed right in the direction where he was heading, the direction where Lance hopefully was. Captain Peter's mind raced. Their mission had been a stealth operation under cover of darkness. There shouldn't be any aerial combat. Phase 2 was supposed to be the overt combat phase, taking place on German-controlled shores any time now. Had his own crashed plane tipped off the Germans? With a renewed sense of urgency, the captain numbed himself to the pain and charged through the mud and barely breathable air. After 20 exhausting minutes, the dark shape of the downed German fighter finally loomed out of the overcast, soggy French countryside. Drawing his pistol from a holster beneath his leather bomber jacket, Captain Peters dropped into a crawl under the cover of rain, not only soaked to the bone but now also caked with mud. His heart pounded as he crawled even closer, preparing himself for the sound of gunshots and perhaps the sight of his brother and his detachment. But as he reached the wreckage, Captain Peter's breath caught in his throat and his eyes widened in shock. This was no German fighter plane. Captain Hob sat bolt upright. He had passed down on a cot in one of the crew's quarters, recovering from his first hectic day as ship's captain. The ferret yawned and rubbed his little eyes in sleepy contentment.
Man, oh man! It was a dream again. It's like a TV show that I can watch in my sleep. And I don't even have to pay for cable. It's really got my heart pounding. Can't wait to see what happens next.
Wiggling merrily out of his cot with a self-satisfied smirk, Captain Hob jumped onto the cold, steel floor and began stretching his limbs vigorously, starting a series of calisthenics.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
A loud growl, emanating from the captain's stomach, interrupted his morning constitutional and reminded him that he needed to eat some meat. Ferrets are hungry little carnivores, after all. Before searching for sustenance, he suited up and geared up like he had already grown accustomed to it, proudly brandishing his ray blaster before holstering it and marching out of his quarters.
What do these scaly freaks have to eat around here anyway?
Scrunching up his nose, leaning forward, the captain activated his smell receptors, which led him in no time at all to a large box down the hallway which he had previously ignored. Inside the box was a refrigerated container full of slabs of purple meat. Without hesitation, Captain Hob promptly seized several pieces of the strange mystery meat, devouring them in seconds. He belched loudly, squinted at the substance, and then shrugged,
Tastes like digging.
making his way to the bridge as he wiped some slime off his hands onto his spacesuit. The captain continued stuffing his face with the alien feed like a mindless bovine beast, staring around the Pretorius with the satisfaction of a newly minted conqueror. As he plopped down into the command chair, soft beeps and flashing lights assured Captain Hob that all was well with his craft. Although the main reactor had eaten up 99% of the ship's power, a small reserve reactor was evidently managing to keep basic systems functioning and operational. The ferret licked his fingertips and began to think aloud.
Alright, time to get down to brass tacks. I've got an engine that needs fixing, an alien language that needs decoding, and a ship that needs commanding. Well, I'm commanding this sucker, so I've got that covered.
The captain swiveled slowly around in his chair as he continued.
I'll need a crew. One that has knowledge and expertise, panache, a bit of a crazy streak.
The swiveling chair grew faster and faster as he racked his brain in frustration.
But who could even fit in here? Do I find a shrink ray and make small humans to serve me? Do I clone myself 3 times? Why do I have to solve all the problems around here?
Captain Hob stopped his swiveling and clutched his head, which was now spinning from his overenthusiastic chair action. As he opened his eyes, they fell on the mysterious red orb, which he had completely forgotten about. The captain stared with squinted eyes at the glowing red ball, resplendent upon its throne. The orb was still a bizarre mystery to him. Was it a computer? A piece of material from another dimension? Why did it smell like cherries? Maybe it was nothing more than an air freshener. Captain Hob doubted that, though. He suspected that it was an important piece of the puzzle of his new existence. It had been the contact of his teeth and saliva with the orb which had granted him sentience, after all. Perhaps it could explain his recurring dreams as well. He suspected that his theory would be confirmed if only he could read the alien data logs on the ship's computer. But unfortunately, the captain could only comprehend enough of the language thus far to navigate the main flying systems. Suddenly, it hit him like a sack of bricks.
I got it!
He stared in wonder at the orb.
I'll abduct 3 ferrets and shove this orb in their mouths to give them the smarts. They'll be just like me. Then my crew and I will repair this ship in no time and reach for the stars and moon.
After several jovial moments of literally patting himself on his back in a manner akin to an otter, he yelled,
Watch out! Here I come!
Captain Hob zoomed around the bridge, pretending to fly, then stopped and scratched his head.
But where do I find these ferrets, though?
He tilted his little head in thoughtful contemplation, and after a moment, a fanged smile spread over his adorable, vicious little face.